In theory, creating software is one of the most democratic things ever. Regardless of whether you work for a big enterprise or a small company, product company or service company, you use the same programming languages, the same frameworks, libraries. So does it really matter for whom do you work? I think it matters, actually. And there are some very specific differences you don't realize until you try working for a particular type of company. There's one special kind I love most, which is product companies. And out of all product companies, there's one specific subtype, which is startups. Today, I would like to talk to you a little bit about startups. Because we talk about them and we build some sort of mental image what startup is, but this is Poland. And maybe you are not from here, but at least here, we have some idealistic image of what startup is, taken from sitcoms like Silicon Valley or taken from what we read on Twitter, which is not super accurate description, I would say. So, this is me. My name is Sebastian Gębski. I'm a principal solutions architect for a company called AWS. You probably have heard about us. And in this company, I am some sort of a startup advisor, which means that I work with startups basically on a daily basis. So this is not my journey, so this is not really personal. I'm not going to talk about what I did. I would be talking to you about what they did or what they do. Especially about things that are specific to a person who is in the boots of the startup CTO for the very first time. Why so? And yeah, there's plenty of my contact information, so feel free to reach out if you are interested in a conversation later. So what's in it for you? Why this could be an interesting talk? Well, first of all, it's a valid career path. Maybe right now you're just getting salary and you work for some enterprise, but you know, things change, things happen. Maybe at some point you would like to open your own business. Sounds like an idea, and maybe you're not prepared for that. Maybe you're wondering how it would be, how it would look like to run your own business, your own startup business. So this talk will be about that. Yes, I would talk a little bit about what startup really is, especially in our conditions, in maybe European conditions, not only in Silicon Valley. There will be some controversial theses, so some things you may agree or not agree, which is good, it's always good. And maybe also some things that you'll learn or you will at least find them funny. This is a plan, but you know what they say about the plans, that the plans are good as long until someone hits you in the face. This was the quote by famous Mike Tyson. So let's maybe a few disclaimers before we actually start. So first of all the opinions here are mine. So they are not taken from any kind of PR statement of my employer, current one or the previous one. These are my opinions, so just keep that in mind. This is not really a technical presentation, so I'm not going to dive into technical stacks of those startups. It wouldn't make sense. This will be mostly about non-technical things CTOs do, startups do. And yes, there's one very important thing. On many slides, you will see this golden bulb, this yellow bulb. And this is typically a reference, some sort of external material. So if you find something that is on the slide interesting, then feel free to use the link, which is accompanied by this yellow light bulb, to dig deeper. All right, cool. What's a startup? And I'm not going to dive into the theory too much. The point is the startup basically is, yes, it is a small organization, but it's a product organization. So a small software house that you may have just started with a few of your colleagues, this is not really a startup. Startup is supposed to be a product organization. And in startup, typically the idea is that you're actually running on borrowed money. Maybe you are bootstrapping, maybe you have some of your own money, but in general, typically you need some funds to start, and someone is investing that funds, so it's all based on the promise and a risk. And in general, startups are not supposed or they are not expected to be profitable very soon. It's all about growth. So someone is investing money in you just because you promise them some future growth. They see the potential in future growth. Of course, it's always accompanied with the risk. So there is a chance, there's a very high chance, I don't want to lie to you, there's a high chance that this will be a dud, this will not work in the end. But still, many people do that because of many reasons. And some of those reasons will be revealed together. One more thing, which is very specific to startups. You can do anything. And basically, you are in the saddle. You're running the company, right? If you are a CTO in a startup, you may just be a developer. Okay, that's fine. But still, there is yes, there is CEO, but when it comes to the technology, there is no one else. There is no one who tells you what to do. It's your own agenda that you build, that you create, that this organization is going to execute, which is very interesting. And it means that you can do everything, and you don't have this huge luggage, huge inertia of technical debt, existing infrastructure, old processes, whatever. You just build not just the product, not just the team, but also organization from scratch. It's thrilling cool. I always loved that. I didn't work for AWS for my whole life. I actually worked for a startup for the very first time in 2001. And this was not when they called them startups. And this was very exciting. Yeah. If you have been at our yesterday's session about the CTO role, you may find this very similar because we've actually mentioned that. So typically when the startup is originated, there's a technical founder. There's someone who will take care of the technology because those startups are very frequently about the technology. The product is technical. So what does this person do? We've covered that. I'm not going to repeat all of this. I just want to refer to those three major archetypes. So probably a CTO should be an architect or should be an advocate who represents the technical product to other people, to the outside world, maybe to customers or at least to investors, and also the head of delivery who makes sure that the shit is getting done. And the good thing is that you don't have to be all of those people. But if you are, for instance, if you will play just one of those roles, you most likely have to find someone else who will play the other ones. You need to delegate. That's how it works. So this is quite interesting, but typically when a person for the very first time thinks about becoming the CTO, this is the bigger concern. I'm a developer. I'm actually coding. Is it expected that I will be a manager? It doesn't sound that sexy. It doesn't sound that interesting. Will I have really time to build the product, or maybe I will have to actually to manage people? So the truth is, based on how it looks like in practice, that again, there are two hats to be worn. And it is possible that the one person will wear two hats, but still it's possible that you will wear just one of them, but still you need to find another person who will wear the other one. So for instance, you are a great CTO, you have the great idea for the product, you know how it should work, you can build it even with your very own eyes, but you need to build a team around you and you need someone to manage this team if you are not that much into managing. So you need maybe I don't know, VP of engineering or a team leader in the beginning, or maybe later an engineering manager or whatever. But in the end, in the organization, in the technical organization, there is a need for someone to wear both of those hats. And there are huge differences. This is not the same thing. I still meet people who do not see the difference here or do not understand the difference. So the leader is someone who leads people, inspires them, and gives them the vision, reduces chaos, gives the clarity. This is our direction. And to be a leader, you don't have to be a formal leader. It doesn't have to be someone who appoints you. If you are a natural leader, people will follow you just because you are kick-ass and you are effective and the things just happen. You can inspire them and they believe your vision and they want to do stuff with you. Why? Because great leaders, they act like magnets. Their success attracts other people. Do you just want to work with people who will pay you a lot of money, or do you just work with people who are super consistent with achieving success? Elon Musk is most likely one of the biggest jerks on the planet. But just check his track record. This guy is badass when it comes to delivering. It's really hard to find something some business he started that didn't get the traction. So it's clear that he expects people to work like crazy hours. But still, people would die or would kill someone to work with this guy because they know that this guy really succeeds, this guy really delivers. Managing is something completely different. If you manage people, this will not end well. You manage the system, but the system according to the systems theory. So the system is basically the whole work environment with the processes, with the tools, with the mechanisms, which makes things happen. So you just observe, you measure, you identify what you want to measure, and then you you put in some improvements. So managing in many cases is much less about people, it's much more about understanding the whole environment of work. If you are somehow interested in that, or if you are somehow interested in the difference between those two, or if you see your future in one of those two directions, there are plenty of very good books that you probably already know about that. But this one is actually very unique because this one is about the intersection between leadership and management. It's created by a very smart gentleman, Michael Lopp, who actually has published another book a few days ago. But anyway, this one I can really recommend to you. Okay, cool. So startup, a very simplified life cycle of a startup for stages. So we need to start with something, some idea, what we are going to build, or which industry are we going to address, or what problem do we want to solve. This is the envisioning phase. Then we actually have to create the product. So when we see the niche, when we see that, all right, there is some space for some quality of life improvement in this area, we will probably start building something, which is quite interesting. Why so? Because it means that most likely in this first phase, we're actually not coding. We're actually not building. So why is there a need for a CTO there? And then once we have a product, then we need to run it on the production because we need actually users to have access to this product. And this changes a lot from the perspective of the CTO and from the perspective what CTO should deliver and should like what really sleeps him or her, makes him or her awake at night. And finally, for every successful organization, things do work very nicely at small scale. But the organization eventually grows. And then things get more and more complex. And we'll fly through those phases in a very, very, let's say, quick way. Why so? Just to understand how the role of the CTO changes and what is really expected of the technical person at those stages. And when actually are you going to start like using our technical skills? What is the good moment? So first of all, in this envisioning phase, when you're actually thinking about the product we want to build, there's no building yet. So we are thinking about our unique value proposition. So why this organization will be special, or why this product will be special? Because if we just go and build another Uber clone, who will buy it? Or is there a need for another Uber clone? Maybe this is not the best idea. Maybe we need something which is more unique, which actually fixes some problem that hasn't been fixed yet. Or maybe the problem is already existent, but we just have an idea how to fix it cheaper, or faster, or simpler, or just with a better quality. That's not always trivial. So this idea, some sort of idea, or some sort of a need, it has to happen first. And how technology can help here? Well, first of all, by acquiring a lot of data. Because we need to, our idea may be just our bias, that we think that, for instance, Airbnb for domestic pets is the best idea ever. Okay, I'm not aware of any Airbnb for domestic pets, but still, does it mean that there is a need to build one? Maybe there is some reason why no one ever built this. So, yes, it's all about using the data and also understanding the data. Because the data is, of course, statistics, so data at scale, but also there's anecdotal data. So actually, many of the CTOs I know, in the very beginning, they are basically in the field visiting real people in their work where they actually do their work and just asking them questions. So how do you work? What's your concern? And for instance, what makes your work fragile or painful or whatever? For instance, I was a CTO in a startup in the beauty and wellness industry. So we're actually visiting hairstylists and asking them, what's your biggest problem? Or how do you run your business every day? How do you schedule the visits? Okay, someone has to call me. Or there's a walk-in, someone just walks the door. Okay, and is it good enough or is it bad enough? I have to synchronize between several people. And you know, when it's a paper, someone forgets sometimes to just put it. And when it's in my paper, there's no notification to the customer, so the customer may forget about it. So it would be nice to have a maybe mobile application to send a notification to that person, and so on, so on. So in the very beginning, the role of the CTO actually is not technical. Unless you think about data, because you're not building anything yet. You don't know what you will be building. If you have been here in the same room at the previous session, there was my colleague has actually recommended to another book by the same author. So that book was called Empowered. This book is Inspired. Marty Kagan is one of, you could say, product management visionaries in Silicon Valley. He's actually an active investor in many startups. And he's created a very good book about what does it mean product management and what does it mean product thinking with product. This is not a framework, so this is not a new version of Scrum or whatever. But it's based on the real life. It's based on how very successful companies have built their products. And this is not a book for the product managers. Actually, I would say that it's a book for all the practitioners who contribute to building products, so including software engineers. So again, a very warm recommendation. So another phase. So let's assume that we have already identified what's the industry or what's the market we would like to attack. It's a good time to start building something. Finally, cool. The main question is, what do we want to build? Because we are moving from a moment when we have no product and we have very limited resources because we don't have much money. So we have a small team and we cannot build everything immediately. We need to make a decision, what do we want to build? And this is not an easy decision. And typically, if you just ask a software engineer how you would build it, this person would just consider all the dependency and propose the most structured, most reasonable way according to the cleanness of architecture or according to how the product will look like at the very end. But in fact, we need to focus on the things which are important in the initial phase. Because for instance, our product, our core value or our unique value proposition may be about innovative UX, user experience, which means that no one really cares about the backend. The backend should be there, but we want to prove that we can create this innovative UX. Or maybe you have a better algorithm, the best algorithm. So maybe we should focus just on this algorithm and just ignore everything else. That's why many of the startups I know have actually mocked their products initially. So there was no product, just some mock-up, and people were thinking they subscribed to a real product, but we were just testing some hypotheses in the very beginning. My favorite and absolutely favorite example is that. So on the left it's me, or rather it's myself mixed with Skeletor from He-Man series. It's created by Midjourney. So Midjourney, probably everyone knows, this is LLM, and it creates, based on the text prompts, it creates some images. But I'm not going to talk about Midjourney. I'm just talking about how they've approached this initial minimum version of application. So they were probably thinking, what is most important? How can we win in this market? How can we be better than our competition? Is it because we will create great mobile application that will be most easy to use? No. They actually thought that clearly their competitive edge is in the model. Their model has to be the best. So what they decided to do is they've completely ignored building the client application, and their client application is basically this. This is a bot in Discord. If you want to use Midjourney, you are not installing any application. There is no website of Midjourney. No, you just go to Discord, there's a server, and in this server there's a bot, and in Discord you just give the command to the bot. And that's how you create those images. They haven't wasted a single minute on building a React application or Angular application or Vue application or whatever. Why? Because this is not what the investors are investing in. This is not what the investors care about. The investors care about this. Is this the best image that could be created based on the prompt when you compare it with the competition? For me, this was absolutely stunning. Oh my God, those guys are so smart. They've reduced everything which was not important. They just implement the most important stuff. This may seem odd. You want to use it, but they don't even have an application. It's damn Discord server. All right. This requires making some very hard decisions. Because every decision may be an investment that can kill your organization, or maybe you will survive. So that's why having a good decision-making framework or model is super useful. This is the one that we use in my organization, in Amazon, and it's very simple. So typically when we make the decision, we just think about it, whether is this decision a one-way door or a two-way door. A one-way door, it means that if you go through, if you make the decision, it's not easy to reverse. Why so? Because it's complex or because something has happened that it cannot be undone. And a two-way door decision is something that can be easily reversed. So it's easy or it's cheap to get it reversed. So why should we spend a lot of time to actually on making this decision? Let's just go with most intuitive version and then we will just change it. But in this case, this decision, the one-way door decision, this is more strategic. This means that this will determine the future of our application or the future of our business, not application, the whole business. So it's good to understand that the decision that you make, for instance, what you will do, what you will work on, really identify which decisions are one-way door and which decisions are two-way door, because that's not so super intuitive. Again, if you want to dive deeper about this decision-making framework and things like that, how to make good decisions, we actually have a very strong culture and we brag about it a lot, like I just did. And there are some good books about this. So this book has been written by two guys who are working for us. Right now they don't, but they've created a whole book about that. So yeah, strongly recommended. Okay, so let's assume that we've built some product, we've built some application, and this is a good time to actually let users in, which means that there's a set of completely new challenges so CTO and your team has to face. Because right now you need to think about what you actually promised to your customers. Because until now it was like a joke. So if your application was down, no one cared because no one used this. And right now your application is actually available for the users. So how important is it for them? If it's just yet another social network, so if it's not available, maybe they will just shrug it away. But if, for instance, their business is relying on your application, this can be a completely different kind of story. And I had this situation actually. And we were building the SaaS application for beauty and wellness industry. And at some point, we had issues with availability. Our application basically went topsy-turvy. And this was the first moment when our engineering team realized that, oh my God, this application, this SaaS application, where they have all their scheduled visits, this is their only source of truth. This is where they know what will happen today. So without that, they don't know whether they can accept the new customer, because there may be someone coming in the next minute. So actually, without our little application that we were giving for free, so we were giving it for free. So we didn't think that, okay, so we have huge obligations because of that. The application was free. But no, they were relying. So there was some sort of unwritten contract between us that they run their business through our application, which means that without our application, there's no business of theirs. So this is how we learned this way. And this was pretty harsh. Why? One of the reasons was that our application was free. It was globally available. So we had to run it 24 hours every day, and including weekends. But we were a very small team. So you can imagine what kind of nightmare it was for all kind of night downtimes. Yeah, so at this point you realize that your role changes a little bit. Because this is not just about building this version of the product or building this feature or even identifying what should be built next. At this point, you realize that actually you need to design some sort of operating system for your whole organization, not just the product. And this operating system is just much more complex than the product that you built. Because yes, there is architecture, but also there is scope planning and management, especially if you collect feedback from the field, from your users. How to match it or mix it with ideas of your product folks and with the bugs and with other things that you would like to do. You actually need to put some structure in that, especially when your organization grows. Same for development process. You actually, everyone hates the word process, but at some point, without setting up the processes, there will be chaos. Nothing else, there will be chaos. Quality assurance. Initially, application is so small that testing it and verifying it's super simple. But at some point, there has to be someone in the organization who decides, like, what do we do to make sure that the quality doesn't drop below a certain level? And this is what CTO is supposed to do. And this is when the CTO realizes, especially when he or she is for the very first time in the role, that there is no book who describes all of that. Or they didn't teach me that in my classes in university. So, and I need to be pragmatic because I have very few people actually. So yeah, in this system or in this operating system of the organization, there are plenty of things. And that's not all. Even if you think just about architecture, architecture is not just a list of components that somehow interact with each other. There are actually many dimensions. And of course, not all of those dimensions are important and relevant since the very beginning. No, your platform is most likely very specific. So maybe in the beginning, for instance, performance, no one really cares because there are very few people and there is like no one compute intensive there and you have very little data, so you don't care. Scalability, maybe the same case. This will matter after a few years. But for instance, high availability, maybe this is required. Just like in our case, without our application, there is basically no business for the Berbers. So realizing that there are so many aspects, this is maybe a little bit overwhelming. Yet another recommendation. Elad Gil is actually one of the smartest people I've ever met. Like I would say that it's one of two most smart people I've ever met. And the good thing is that, the bad thing is that he doesn't share his knowledge very frequently, but the good thing is that sometimes he does. And that's one of those sources of information, one of the best books. It's not a book about building products like the one by Marty Kagan. It's actually the book about building product organizations. So it's like a gold mine of very good things, very useful things. And it's not like a framework that is ready to use. It's more like a collection of anecdotes. So, and I find it like probably the most useful resource for building this operating system for the small product organization. Of course, things get far, far more complex when you're scaling out. And I'm not sure whether I will have it on one of the future slides, but there was a great book by, I think, Reid Hoffman, who was an investor, early investor in LinkedIn. The book was called Blitzscaling. Maybe I will have it on one of my slides. And there was one very shocking truth there, that a successful startup is growing so quickly that within a very short period of time, maybe a year or not much more, you can actually go through 3 very distinctive stages of growth. And for each of those stages, you need a CTO with a different personality. So initially, you need someone who's like a commando. So he can do whatever. Coding, yeah, cool. Testing, yeah, cool. Ordering cookies, yeah, cool. We are getting kicked out of our apartment, yeah, cool, I will find something else. Like literally, you are doing all this stuff because there is no one else. You are responsible for all this shit. So in the beginning, you just need people who are like, they are constantly in the fire of a battle and they are super flexible. They can do whatever's needed. In the second moment, you actually need people who are very good when it comes to adopting change. So they have super awareness and they realize, all right, the shit that we were doing yesterday doesn't work anymore. And I'm very bold, so since today we are doing it like that. So a person who is very quick to do changes. This is not easy. First of all, you need to be aware what doesn't work. Second of all, you need to understand roughly why doesn't it work. Then you need some options, so how do we change? And finally, you need to execute. And executing changes, not everyone is so super enthusiastic about the changes that happen every day. So that's another kind of personality. And finally, this third stage is people who govern. So when we have set some boundaries, now you need to enforce them. You need to make sure that the chaos doesn't get into all of that. This means completely different personalities. So this is the stage, scaling out beyond a single team. This is the stage which requires this third kind of personality. And it's tricky because your processes get more complex, your knowledge management gets far more complex. You need to actually think about things like logical composition of your solution at scale, because you have this cognitive load mental barrier that there will be no single developer in your 100 developers team that will be able to know everything about the system. This is the moment when you realize that this is not possible anymore. So you need to split it. You need to set some boundaries within this, which is not super simple. And of course, some additional issues appear, like a technical debt. And this is a super controversial and super interesting topic. And some things that people do not agree with are, for instance, that technical debt is something completely different than bad engineering. So if something is broken, if some maybe initial decision was just bad, or maybe there were no standards, or maybe actually we had someone who didn't know the craft that well, in such a case, it's bad engineering. This is not a technical debt. The technical debt is when you make a conscious decision. Okay, we will go shortcuts here, but we know why. Because it will make us achieve something in a shorter time. So it's a conscious decision. So actually, technical debt is not a bad thing. It's a useful tool. So instead of thinking all the time about how do we reduce technical debt or how do we get rid of the technical debt, we should think about different stuff. How do we contain technical debt to make sure that its effect is minimized? This is the proper way of thinking. I'm not sure whether you know Will Larson. Will Larson, very smart guy. I like talking about smart guys. So Will Larson, I think recently he was a CTO of a company called Calm. It's one of the companies that create those mindfulness applications. So if you are in meditation, you've most likely heard about Calm. So Will Larson, he also worked in Uber. I'm not sure. I don't think he was a CTO there, but he was there when Uber was like super scaling. And he has written a good book about this. This book is called Elegant Puzzle, and there's a great chapter on scaling the architecture. And there's a very good paragraph there that each time they were building a new service, microservice, you can call it whatever you want, the new part of the system, they were setting up its validity period or expiration period. So this will work well until our scale gets 100x of what we have right now, or until we provide promotions different than X, because right now our promotion model is only X. So they were designing the software, having in mind at the back of their heads that this will be rewritten. Because this is what you do, you always rewrite this stuff. So instead of trying to save it, refactor it, whatever, they just focused on contracts, so how it's called from the external world, and setting those boundaries so abstractions do not leak out, and it's communicated since the very beginning when this should be replaced. It's a very good concept. It's a very useful concept. Sometimes it's called immutable code concept. And it also helps a lot with solving the technical debt issue. So yeah, again, to summarize, punchline for this. Technical debt, yeah, please do not quote me on that, but technical debt is not a bad thing, not necessarily a bad thing. It's a tool. But for all the tools, you need to use them wisely. Cool. So yeah, there were slides with some recommendations, and there's slides with 2 recommendations. So the last one probably already knows. Everyone already knows. So this is the most simple framework for building larger organizations. So if you need to go below one team, if you need to structure somehow your organization, this is a great inspiration. I'm not saying you should follow it like literally, but if you compare it with other more formal enterprisey organization building frameworks, this one is far better. On the right hand, again, this is the very controversial book, because this is a book about measuring how highly performing is the technical organization. It's a very scientific, but in the end, they have synthesized the whole book in a very short, I would say, attachment. including some graph, and this graph depicts all the practices that the highly performing organizations implement. So I recommend you maybe not to read the whole book, but just take a look at this synthesis and treat it as a checklist. When your organization scales, you're adding more teams, you're adding more capabilities. Maybe you are splitting some things at some point. Maybe you are excluding infrastructure. Maybe you are doing some other fancy, crazy things with your organization. Go again through that checklist, just to verify, haven't you lost what constitutes a highly performing organization? Sometimes it's good to be a little bit scientific. Okay, so we went through all of those stages. So how does the role changes? How does the optic change? What you should be looking at? But there is more. There is more in what startup is. There is something else in startup DNAs which makes a startup, and that's the good moment to actually talk about it. So this is actually a real quote from the real person, but I haven't asked him if I can quote him, so it's anonymized, sorry. And this was our real conversation. He asked me basically, do you know, it's a Polish startup, a very successful startup, and he asked me, do you know, how do I compete with the big organizations in my industry from the United States who have 100 times more money than I do? Easily, by having 100 times more focus than they have. Which means that the startups have to pick their battles wisely. There's always 100 times more things to be done than you can actually do. So you need to pick those ones that really have to be done. That's super important. And in many cases, people really struggle with understanding that because they would like the architecture to be clean, the code to be clean, the whatever, implement event sourcing, so on, so on. But in many cases, it just doesn't matter, or it's not critical, or it won't really help. Like, think about this application or this platform for beauty and wellness. So for hairdressers, hairstylists, nail artists, whatever. Do you really think that the clean code or writing it in React or in Vue would really change the chances of success of this application? No. The chance of success for this application was not about the technology. The technology was absolutely secondary in this case. Of course, the technology could impair it, make it slower, make it worse. We could implant there 1 million bugs, so this is completely not usable. But on the other hand, for instance, Erlang can be much faster than Python when it comes to concurrent processing. But would it really make sense to teach everyone in the team Erlang just to get this boost in concurrency speed? I don't think so. This is not where our competitive edge was. So yeah, the focus is always super important. Oh yeah, I do have blitzscaling on the slide, yeah. So understanding that, what does it really mean that your organization's main value is growth? That's also another thing which is very deeply embedded in organization DNA. That's something that there are some techniques actually to be achieved to teach people that mindset. Another concept that is actually very interesting, but it doesn't appear that frequently, I call it development agility. Maybe you could call it development velocity. So this is the unit of velocity for introducing a smallest atomic change that is possible. So what does it mean? When you make a single commit and you want it into production, how much fuss is added on the way? So how much time does it take to compile the whole thing? How much time do you need to wait for this to be packaged, deployed, released? Is there any manual gating on the way? Is there someone who has to do manual test or manually approve? Or do you bundle this in some weekly bundles? What is, because in the beginning, when the project is very small, it's almost immediate. But in time, we keep adding new things. For instance, yeah, we scan dependencies, or we add some packaging, or okay, we want to work in Docker containers, so we need to build the containers, and we actually debug in the containers, but it takes a little bit more time, and the compilation is already 5 minutes, so maybe I will go and grab some coffee and talk with the guys. And in time, it adds a tax, a time tax on every activity we do, which slows us down. And this is how, if you compare large organizations, enterprises, with older processes, especially regulated organization, when someone has to inspect this stuff before each release, or organizations which do not have any automated testing, so all the testing has to be done manually, then this development agility, so this unit of time that is required to deploy a single atomic change in code in production, it grows significantly. And this is what kills the velocity of change. This is what kills the nimbleness of the startup. So initially, you start with everything being so blitz, so fast, so quick, but if you don't pay attention to this, development agility, it may actually, you may actually end up like being like any other enterprise. I remember that when I've reached a headcount of 70 engineers, I've already hired for a position called Head of Development Experience. And this guy's only role, he was not building features. This guy's only role was running around the organization and looking what slows developers down. And what can we do? What smart can we do to make them faster? But not type faster. No, just remove all the toil. For instance, maybe we can get that container smaller. Maybe it's possible. Or maybe we can bundle some things that will come together. Maybe we don't have to containerize anything. Maybe when we generate test data, we can actually make it in a smarter way. So we don't have to wait for another scrambled, anonymized backup. Maybe there's some better ways to do that. Because there are plenty of practices that impair our development agility. So yeah, all of those small slow builds, or if something is unstable, so like breaking builds, or if something is manual, or if we add some artificial abstractions that are actually not needed, they also can slow things down a lot. So this is also a part of a startup, because if you not pay attention, you can actually, while being a very small organization, you can still be very slow. Most likely, the most controversial slide. It comes from Elad Gil, I've already mentioned him. One of the things that makes startups successful is the fact that their founders are pushing so hard. They are pushing so strongly. So it's not that the organization is just small and they have no technical depth in the beginning. It's also that they are motivated to make it succeed. This is maybe their only chance, because they are working on their own business. This is their own business. They are invested in that, and this also makes the difference. But if you think about this, not everyone is a company founder. So even in the initial team, there are developers who may not have founded the company. Maybe they don't have any kind of stock in this organization. But still, there has to be a way, or there has to be some contract, there has to be some agreement between the founders and the rest of the team, which makes them belong to the same team, which unifies their purpose, unifies their goal, which gives a legitimation to the founders to actually impose some pressure on the team. By the way, there's a very good book on applying the pressure and the pressure in general, because the pressure actually is something that also makes us stronger. Without the pressure, if we are not challenged enough, we're actually, our development, self-development is being sacrificed. So about this social contract, or about this agreement, so whether we are on the same page with the founders or not. Yeah, my favorite, Elon Musk, has put something like that on the web. It's not the most controversial thing he has put there. So no one ever changed the word on 40 hours a week. We can agree or not. I would say that, just think about it. If you're just starting a business, and if you found a very good niche, and then you think that this may be my chance of a lifetime. Maybe this is the moment. And right now, if we really focus, if we really sacrifice a bit more, maybe actually this will pay off and I will not have to work for the rest of my life. Maybe this is the moment. You never know when this moment comes, but maybe this is the moment. And here are the questions that can help you to realize whether this is this moment and what would you do at that moment. So what do you want to be paid for? If you want to be paid just for the time, because you set your boundaries in hours, that I want to pay to 8 hours, that's maybe not the best place for you. If you want to be paid for effects or for the outcomes, so in this case, it means that the hour aspect is variable, which means that for a certain time of outcome, you need to spend more time than the 8 hours. Those borders, when you have a team, everyone may have different borderline when it comes to work-life balance. So it's really important to have this social contract. Social contract is not a written contract. It's an agreement which is formed when you hire someone. That, for instance, what kind of contribution is expected. So if, for instance, you go to Elon Musk hires you to his new endeavor, and he tells you that, all right, but we work here 16 hours per day. And this is what you get in exchange. In exchange, maybe you will get, I don't know, shares, maybe you will get just some fame, that then you can say that you've contributed to a super successful product, whatever. It's an agreement. Sometimes it can be a verbal agreement, but at least you know what to expect. And if we all agree, no one is surprised later. Because if we don't make it this agreement, some people will always be disappointed and surprised. And there will be always quarrels. Because maybe I'm working 16 hours, and maybe you are working only 8. Not because you are lazy or maybe you don't care, but maybe you have a family, you have small children, or you have whatever. And talking about this openly and admitting to that and making it clear is a part of this social contract. So that's something that I find out absolutely crucial when it comes to working in startups, but not only. And there's the final aspect when it comes to the social contract. So when you contribute to something and your contribution is not expressed in hours, so it's not 8 hours per day, it comes with both sides. So minuses and pluses. So there can be some pros. So maybe, for instance, you can participate in the earnings or in the success of the organization, but you also participate in the risks because this organization may be a dud. This startup may not trigger off. This startup may not be successful. So if you are just getting a flat salary, so every month, X K, X grand, whatever, so is it the part of skin in the game? How are you contributing? How are you reaping out awards when this organization succeeds? You don't. So there is a need for a better model. The model that rewards you proportionally to the success of this company. If you are giving more, if you are giving a bit of yourself in this company, you should be rewarded accordingly. This is called skin in the game. Your skin in this game. And it means that maybe you should, for instance, get some shares. So if the value of the company is after 1 year, it's 10 times more than it was 1 year ago, the value of your shares is also 10 times more. So this model makes people, or helps to get people thinking in terms of product success, not a technical success or working 8 hours, and that's it. Very good book by very famous gentleman, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. You probably have heard about him from his book called Black Swan. I will skip it because we're actually running out of time, so I will speed up a little bit. 5 common mistakes in very early startup founders, and if those mistakes happen, then you're doomed. So yeah, things like beautiful architecture, engineering, perfectionism, there's no place for that in startups. This focus thing that I've mentioned is super crucial. So without that, no, this is not going to happen. Yeah, technical success. There is no such term like technical success. So technically my solution works. No, it doesn't matter. We are looking for the product success. It doesn't make sense that your code is perfect if the product sucks. No point. The customers do not care. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it. It's all about getting data and acting upon the data. Because our bias, our opinions, yeah, they are super useful. But if someone has facts, facts always beat opinions. So look for facts, look for data. Yeah, poorly handled build versus buy dilemma. This is the focus issue. So if you want to build everything, come on, we need to build another notification issue, or we need to build another telemetry framework, or we need to build a logging solution. No. Will your users, will your customers care about how do you log information? Most likely not. So just use something which is ready. Just use an open source product. Just use software as a service available already. Just use your favorite vendor, whatever, and focus on what is most important, on the key unique value proposition that you have. Not understanding the role culture plays in the organization. So if you just bring people who just want to work 8 hours, then you may waste your opportunity of the lifetime. So it's really important that people really believe in what you're building. That this is the shit that can make us millionaires. And we are not building this just to keep ourselves busy. No, I'm not telling you about the mission. This is not about saving the world. I'm just talking about building something you believe can make you succeed, or can resonate with your motivations, whatever are your motivations. So yeah, sorry, this is not about like working 8 hours per day. And my previous CEO in one of the startups, he called it McDonaldization of the work. So this is not about how much time you spend on like getting burgers up and down and so on. No, this is not about that. Cool. Let's wrap it up. My final slides. In the beginning, there are many hats that you can wear in startup organization. You don't have to wear them all, but if you don't, you have to find someone who will for you. Pick your battles wisely. Focus. Focus is super important. Sales people will never understand that. Decision-making framework. To be transparent, but also to be quick with the decisions. Not every decision has to be after the 3 months long analysis. Social contract. I'm not sure everyone got it. This is quite a complex topic. This is not a written contract. This is the agreement. This is my expectations and your expectations. This is what I promise you, and this is what I expect from you. And not myself as a CTO, but it's from everyone's perspective. As a developer, this is what I expect from the organization, but this is also my commitment to the organization. This is even more important than the written contract. This is why we are here. This is our ethos in this particular team. This is our foundation of our culture. Data, I've already mentioned. Technical debt is a tool, and probably half of the room doesn't agree. we are grown to hate technical debt, but no, this is a useful tool if you know how to use this. And yes, in the end, you are the pusher. Like Elad Gil has said, without pushing, this will not happen. So you're adding the energy to the work system. You are the spiritus movens, you are the energy source, and you are supposed to tame the chaos and bring clarity. This is when your startups may succeed. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, we've run out of time, so feel free to grab me at the corridor, and I hope you had some fun. Here is my contact info. Also, there's a link to the slides. So if, for instance, there were some references, but you didn't have time to grab them, feel free to grab them from the slides online. And that's about it. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference.